I am honored to stand before this interfaith gathering and to reflect on this matter, which I think is very important at the heart of Nigeria's stability and future: the role of religious literacy in fostering national cohesion. Our country, Nigeria, is an intensely religious society. Faith is not incidental to our lives. It is central. It shapes how we think, how we act, and how we relate to one another. For millions of Nigerians, to be a Christian or Muslim is not simply to belong to a religious category. It is to inhabit a moral universe that gives meaning and direction to our lives. Yet, unfortunately, within this deep religiosity lies a paradox, and that's why we're here. The same faith that has power to unite us, to console us, and to guide us has at times also implicated our division, suspicion, and sometimes even weaponized for violence and death. The problem, however, is not always religion in itself. More often, it is a deficit of understanding, a lack of religious literacy that turns our difference into danger. Religious literacy, properly understood, is not about conversion or compromise. It does not ask anyone to dilute their convictions. Religious literacy is the ability to understand, to interpret, and engage with religious beliefs, practices, and identities in an informed, respectful, context-sensitive manner. It goes beyond mere awareness of different faiths to include knowledge of their core teachings, internal diversity, historical development and social influence, as well as the capacity to distinguish authentic doctrine from misinterpretation or manipulation. In plural societies like ours, religious literacy enables individuals to navigate differences without fear or prejudice, reduce the spread of stereotypes, and foster constructive dialogue that we've been talking about, mutual respect, and peaceful coexistence among people of different religious traditions. Across our communities, we too often encounter narratives shaped by half-truths and inherited prejudices. Sweeping generalizations about what Catholics believe, or Christians believe, what Muslims intend. These circulate easily, hardening attitudes and widening social distance. These misperceptions are sometimes reinforced by forces that speak with authority and yet lack understanding or grounding. We must confront a very uncomfortable reality. Not all who assume religious leadership are adequately formed in the tradition they proclaim to represent. In some instances, individuals who have not undergone rigorous religious education or theological training establish churches or mosques and proceed to interpret the sacred texts, the Bible and the Quran, without sufficient depth, context, or accountability. The consequences can be very profound because selective readings taken out of historical and doctrinal context can distort teachings, influence or inflame passions, and legitimize intolerance. When such interpretations are amplified among already vulnerable and uninformed audiences, they can become an catalyst for division rather than instrument of peace. That is why religious literacy must extend not only to the general public, but also to those who occupy positions of spiritual authority. Leadership without learning is dangerous, especially in matters of faith. Let me take us through some global experiences, sobering experiences that we can learn lessons from, which have happened as a result of religious illiteracy and intolerance. In Iraq, sectarian divisions between Sunni and Shia community have been exacerbated by years of mutual misunderstandings and manipulated religious narratives, contributing to cycles of violence and instability. Religious narratives, sometimes selectively interpreted or deliberately distorted, have been used to legitimize political claims and demonize the other, reinforcing communal boundaries. Militia groups, political parties, and even external actors have exploited these narratives, transforming unity into a tool of conflict. In India, tensions between Hindu and Muslim communities have at various moments been intensified by ignorance and misinterpretation of each other's beliefs, sometimes erupting into communal violence. Importantly, such episodes are often fueled by political actors who instrumentalize religious identity for electoral or ideological gain, amplifying fears and portraying communities in oppositional terms. Rumors, stereotypes, and selective interpretations of history or doctrine can quickly circulate, especially in moments of crisis, reinforcing division remain manageable. In Myanmar, a lack of understanding combined with deliberate distortion of religious identity has contributed to the persecution of minority groups with devastating humanitarian consequences. Tensions between the Buddhist majority and Muslim minorities, particularly the Rohingya, have been intensified by misinformation and the politicization of religious identity. Narratives portraying minority outsiders or security threats have been simplified or amplified by nationalist actors and segments of the state, deepening social divisions. But let us go to a very useful European illustration that comes from long and painful history of division between Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland, particularly during the time known as the Troubles. For decades, tension between largely Catholic nationalist communities and largely Protestant unionist communities were sustained not only by political disagreement, but also by deep social religious misunderstanding. This led to a lot of separation, where you had Protestants living in different enclaves and Catholics living in different enclaves. This manifested as a result of lack of religious literacy that gave rise to this persistent stereotyping. The deficit understanding led to segregation and division within the communities. And this sounds familiar to some of the communities we have in Nigeria, where Muslims and Christians live in sacred enclaves. But more importantly, Ireland was able to find a solution. What was later known as the Good Friday Resolution brought about unity, bringing about a turning point, not only political but socially. And since then, initiatives such as integrated education, interfaith dialogue, and community reconciliation programs have sought to bridge divides by encouraging people to learn more about themselves in many meaningful ways. For me, these are very clear lessons for Nigeria. When religious identities are poorly understood and socially segregated, they can harden fault lines. They can lead people to give up instead of interacting and engaging across these lines. The same identities that separate us can coexist. They can even cooperate and within a shared national framework. So in other words, the Northern Ireland experience and the others have taught demonstrate the dangers of religious illiteracy and the possibilities that can emerge when understandings begin to replace suspicion. If we are to build a cohesive nation, we must go beyond tolerance. Tolerance can sometimes imply distance, an uneasy willingness to coexist with meaningful understanding. What Nigeria needs is something deeper than tolerance: informed engagement, mutual respect, and shared purpose. I will skip some of these things because the paper may be given. Our educational institutions must be more willing to expose young Nigerians to balanced and respectful knowledge about the country's major religions. Interfaith dialogues must be sustained. Engagements must continue beyond ceremonial occasions. At their core, both Christianity and Islam affirm values that are essential for national cohesion: justice, compassion, peace, and the dignity of human life, which unfortunately we are gradually losing. The challenge, therefore, before us is not the incompatibility of these traditions, but the failure to understand them properly. National cohesion cannot be decreed. It must be cultivated through knowledge, humility, and sustained engagement. But more specifically, I want to leave NIREC with this recommendation: to consider the possibility of establishing a national framework for religious literacy and responsible clergy practice, anchored on cooperation rather than coercion. Under this, NIREC, working with the Christian Association of Nigeria and the Nigerian Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, should introduce a voluntary but nationally recognized certification system for clerics and set minimum standards in theology, ethics, constitutional rights, and conflict sensibility that require continuous education, create a joint code of conduct with a peer review and disciplinary mechanism for addressing hate speech and misinterpretation that cause division. As I conclude, let me emphasize again, religious literacy is not a luxury. It is a necessity for peace in a society as diverse and deeply religious as ours. If we neglect it, we risk deepening the divides that threaten our unity. But if we embrace it, we open the possibility of a Nigeria where faith becomes not a barrier, but a bridge. May we have the wisdom to learn from one another, the discipline to teach responsibly, and the courage to build a nation defined not by division, but by understanding. I thank you all.